Remain seated and come to order.
How we doing, Mr. Gary?
We are ready, Your Honor.
Okay, give me 1 second to get this back on here. Madam Court Reporter, you good?
Yes.
Mr. Williams, who do you anticipate calling next?
William Chris.
Okay, let me pull my notes here. All right, we're going to go Chris next.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Is Arnold coming later today, you think?
He's the other witness in that room.
But we're going to do Chris next. Okay. All right, Mr. Davis, anything you want to talk about before we get going?
No, Your Honor.
All right. Let's look at this and we'll go. Everybody got water that needs water?
Yes, sir.
All right, Mr. Gary, if you'll bring them in.
All right. Leave your cell phone, personal items, record bottle, water to go with you.
All right, come to rest, please. All right, jury, that'll probably be our last recess through the morning break. Again, if you have, through lunch. If you have any hearing issues, again, please just raise your hand. I'm kind of looking out to make sure everybody can hear well. And we'll get started. Mr. State Attorney, you ready to call your next witness?
Yes, sir.
Who would you like to call, sir?
State calls William Chris.
William Crisp. Mr. Clerk, you're going to swear him in again, okay, sir? Mr. Crisp, if you'll raise your right hand for me, sir.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the evidence you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Morning, Mr. Crisp. A couple things before we get started. If you make sure you speak loud enough for Mr. Gary or bailiff in the back to hear you. Our jury is out here today, so we're speaking in that direction to where everybody in the room can hear you. The second thing is if you hear an objection, if you'll pause your testimony, let me hear what that objection is. I'll instruct you how to proceed, okay?
Yes, sir.
All right, Mr. State Attorney.
Thank you, Judge. Good morning, Mr. Chris. Would you state your name for the record?
It's James William Crisp IV.
All right. And were you previously employed with the Jackson County Sheriff's Office?
Yes, sir.
For how long?
8 years.
Okay. And specifically, were you working with the Sheriff's Office in 2016?
Yes, sir.
All right. Do you know the defendant, Mr. Zachary Wester?
I do.
How so?
He was hired by the Sheriff's Office, and I was his FDO, field training officer.
That was my next question. Could you say what an FDO is for the record? Okay. Field training officer. Have you ever been a field training officer before you were one for Mr. Wester?
Yes, sir.
All right. How much experience had you had being an FTO before Mr. Wester?
Several. I had done probably 4 or 5 new recruits through the program before Mr. Wester.
Would you just very generally tell the jury what it is that a field training officer does?
The program is designed for, it's a 16-week program designed to take someone that has just finished just finished a basic recruit training program and passed a state board to be a law enforcement officer on the road as a deputy sheriff. Now, sometimes you get officers that come from other agencies that don't require a 16-week course to show the way the Jackson County Sheriff's Office does business. They already know how to be a law enforcement officer, so they're just showing how the Jackson County Sheriff's Office does things. They still go through the book. They're still observed. All their calls are recorded. All their reports, anything they do like that is still recorded in the FTO manual, and it's still signed off on just like they went through the whole 16-week course.
Judge, this time I'd move to publish 1B as in boy, the field training manual.
You may go ahead and publish it, counsel.
Mrs. Bittner, if you could pull up 1B as in boy, specifically page 7 of that document. All right. Now, could I get you, Ms. Bittner, to scroll down? There's a bottom paragraph which begins with the FTO program will successfully culminate. Could you scroll to that? Okay, and Mrs. Bittner has her, the mouse there. We can't really highlight on this file, but are you able to see, Mr. Chris, where her mouse is?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Could you please read that paragraph beginning with that sentence, the FTO program will successfully...
Yes, sir. The FTO program will successfully culminate after a minimum of 16 weeks of training. Consideration may be given to shorten the training period to 3 phases for ROs, which is recruits, who show exceptional and above average performance. Want me to keep going?
Yes, sir.
Consideration may also be given to shorten training periods to a minimum of 4 weeks for ROs who possess prior full-time patrol civilian law enforcement experience.
All right. Now, just to be clear, Mr. Wester, there's already been testimony that he had prior experience. Did he participate in the 16-week training or in the 4-week
It
training?
should have been a 4-week training.
All right, and you supervised him for that period, correct?
Yes, sir.
We're going to go into some specifics, but before we go into those, just generally, how did the defendant perform? Did he perform well, or did he struggle?
He performed exceptionally well.
Was he a trainee that, you mentioned that you had other trainees, is he someone that you had to follow up on and remind things during that 4 weeks?
No, sir, not at all.
Did this training in the manual cover the use of body-worn cameras or body cameras?
Yes, sir, it did.
Okay, Mrs. Bittner, if I could get you to go to page 29 of 1B as in boy, the field training manual. I'll wait just a moment. All right. And on page 29, Mrs. Bittner, there's a top paragraph which begins with, "It is the policy of the sheriff's office." Should be at the very top of that page. Go up, right there. And if you could just, all right, Mr. Chris, do you see where her mouse is?
Yes, sir.
All right, could you read that paragraph into the record, please?
It is the policy of the sheriff's office that the VIVU, that's the brand name of the camera we were using at the time, cameras and or in-car cameras are to be used on all traffic stops and pursuits. The camera is not to be used intermittently. It should run continuously from the beginning to the end of the stop or pursuit.
You mentioned that the VIVU cameras were the brand being used at that time, correct?
Yes, sir.
At a later date, did you switch to the Axon body camera system?
It was quite some time later. I believe we've had 3 different ones since the VIVU camera.
Did the policy remain the same, though?
As far as I'm aware, yes, sir.
Okay, and specifically what we've read in this paragraph?
Yes, sir.
That remained the same.
Yes, sir.
Was there also a separate policy apart from what's in here for the Jackson County Sheriff's Office regarding the use of body cameras?
Yes, sir.
All right, Mrs. Bittner, and Judge, I'd move to publish Exhibit 1C, the body camera policy at this time.
You can go ahead and publish.
Ms. Bittner, if you could pull up 1C on pages, let's start at page 2. Scroll down to section 2. Okay. Judge, if I could move around where I can see this a little better as well. Try to put my voice up. All right. Mr. Crisp, are you able to read on your screen the section that begins, I guess under 2.1, where it says BWCs allow for? Are you allowed to see? Are you
Yes, sir.
able to see that?
Yes, sir.
Could you read that in the record, please?
Yes, sir. BWCs allow for accurate documentation of deputy, public contacts, arrests, and critical incidents. They also serve to enhance the accuracy of deputy reports and testimony in court.
And just so we're clear, what are BWC?
That is body-worn camera.
All right, could you continue to read the paragraph number 2?
Yes, sir. Audio and video recordings also enhance this agency's ability to review probable cause for arrest, deputy and suspect interaction, and evidence for investigative and prosecutional purposes, and to provide additional information for deputy evaluation and training.
Okay, and then paragraph number 3 there. Could you read that into the record?
The BWC may also be useful in documenting crime scenes and other events that include the confiscation and documentation of evidence or contraband.
Bittner, could I get you to scroll down to page 6 of 1C? Page 6. All right, and there's a section number 2 on documentation. Are you able to see that at the top of the screen, Mr. Chris?
Yes, sir.
Would you please read all of 2, so paragraphs that are sublabeled A, B, and C under 2 documentation?
Yes, sir. 2 documentation. A is deputies shall document in charging affidavits and incident reports that a video was recorded from a body-worn camera and is evidence. B, deputies are permitted and encouraged to review the video recordings as a part of the thorough investigation when writing a report. C, if a deputy fails to activate a body-worn camera, let me start over. If a deputy fails to activate the body-worn camera, fails to record the entire contact, or interrupts the recording, the deputy shall document the reason in the incident report.
Mr. Crisp, did the defendant, Mr. Wester, demonstrate that he understood and knew how to follow these policies, whether it's on this separate policy on 1C or in the manual on B?
Yes, sir.
All right, and that's also documented, correct, in the manual, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. Mrs. Bittner, if I could get you to go to 1B as in boy, page 87 of that document. All right, if you could scroll down towards the bottom half of that page, under a heading which reads Patrol Procedures, your mouse is there, correct? All right, Mr. Crisp, you're able to see where that is?
Yes, sir.
All right, and at the bottom of that section there, there's one that reads FIVU and in-car camera use. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
All right, if you scroll across there to the right, it's got a date. What does that indicate?
5/19/2016.
What does that mean?
That is the date that we went over that policy together.
And it's got a recruit signature there on that same date, correct?
Yes, sir.
And an FTO signature. Is that your signature?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chris, did this training also, so moving away from body camera videos for the moment, did this training with the defendant also include how to collect and how to preserve evidence?
Yes, sir.
Mrs. Bittner, if you could go to page 193 of Exhibit 1B as in boy, the field training manual. All right. And if we could scroll to the middle of the page of 193, where it reads, have the recruit demonstrate. There we go. Scroll down a little bit further. All right, so now in the middle of the page, that paragraph, could you read that into the record, Mr. Chris?
Yes, sir. Have the recruit demonstrate how to properly secure, tape, label, and document evidence being submitted. This includes the documentation on both the package and the evidence or property sheet.
And did you do that with the defendant, Mr. Wester?
Yes, sir.
Did he demonstrate that he knew how to do it properly?
Yes, sir.
All right, I'd like to ask you about found and abandoned property. Was that covered in this training as well?
Yes, sir, it was.
All right, Mrs. Bittner, just one page, further, 194. The first paragraph of this, which begins with make the recruit familiar. Could you read that paragraph into the record, please?
Yes, sir. Make the recruit familiar with the department's policy regarding found or abandoned property. It is to be documented just as if it were evidence. It should be noted on the property receipt if a reporting person wishes to claim the property if it is unclaimed. Some designated property may be claimed by the finder after 90 days. Exceptions are weapons and narcotics, among others. Before the property is claimed by a finder, it must be advertised and a prescribed number of times in the local newspaper within the first 45 days that the department has possession of it. Property with the serial numbers removed cannot be claimed by a finder.
All right, and actually, let's read even one paragraph below that, beginning with when packaging and labeling. Could you read that into the record?
Yes, sir. When packaging and labeling property, the following information must be included: case number, name of defendant or subject if known, name of victim, offense, list of items included in the package, officer's name.
Scroll down a little bit, Mrs. Bittner. Just want to see. Okay. And then the sentence below that.
The above information should also be included on the evidence/property receipt.
Right. And the same question I asked you previously. Did the defendant demonstrate that he understood and was able to follow this aspect of your training with you?
I don't recall if we had a specific call with abandoned property, but this was gone over in the FTO.
Okay. And now when you say this, so maybe not for abandoned property, but for evidence.
The policy, yes, sir, for evidence.
Understood. Thank you. Was there also a separate policy apart from what's in this manual on evidence collection for Jackson County?
Yes, sir.
All right, Mrs. Bittner, if you could pull up 1D as in dog, the evidence collection policy. Could you go to page 4 of this document? Let's scroll down to sections capital B and C. If you could just bring those to the middle of the page, there we go. The first one labeled B, its header there is powder for narcotics. Mr. Chris, do you see that?
Yes, sir.
Could you read that into the record?
Powder from narcotics. All powder form of narcotics, i.e. cocaine, meth, will be put in either a glass/plastic collection vials or bottles, sealed, then placed in a plastic evidence bag. The vial or bottle will be marked in permanent marker with the case number and exhibit number. C. Evidence marking. Items will be marked in such a manner that there is no damage or contamination to the evidence. The collecting member's initials should be placed directly on items of evidence for positive identification in later court proceedings. Items that cannot or should not be marked, such as hair, paint, stains, bullets, or items submitted for latent print processing, will be placed in a suitable container that will be sealed and marked.
All right, let's scroll down a little bit further, Mrs. Bittner. I'd like Mr. Chris to be able to see just, D for packaging.
D. Packaging. Certain items of evidence require distinct packaging methods. The type of evidence seized will determine the factor for the packaging method utilized. Marijuana will be taken from the bag it was found in and placed in a paper bag, labeled and sealed. The bags that the marijuana was found in will be packaged in plastic evidence bags, labeled and sealed. These methods include.
Let's go ahead and read 1 first, which
All
is
right.
for plastic bags.
Plastic bags. Plastic bags are suitable for small, dry objects not requiring serological analysis. Damp or biological items will not be placed in plastic bags. Plastic bags will be sealed with evidence tape and properly marked to prevent loss, contamination, or unauthorized access. The submitting officer must write his or her initials on both top and bottom of the evidence tape with black permanent markers, i.e. Sharpies. The label must be completely filled out with black permanent marker, no ink pens. Writing must be legible.
All right, and then Ms. Bittner, if you could scroll down to all paragraph 2 is, all right, and could you read paragraph 2, paper bags?
Paper bags. Paper bags are suitable for dry objects or for wrapping garments or large items. Paper bags can be sealed around the end or paper bags can be sealed around the end or over area of large. That doesn't make any sense. Hang on. Paper bags can be sealed around the end or over area of large items such as tools, safes, and vehicle bumpers to prevent loss of adhering evidence. Evidence will be placed in the paper bag closed, top of the bag folded over, sealed at the opening with evidence tape, and marked with the member's initials. The label must be filled out completely with permanent marker, no ink pens.
Scroll down, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chris.
RS.
And likewise, did the defendant demonstrate that he understood and could follow this policy?
Yes, sir.
Ms. Bittner, if I could get you to go back to 1B as in boy, the field training manual, page 95. On page 95, in the middle of the list, and a header that reads evidence section. All right, and I see your, there you go. Your mouse is moving around. Are you able to see where that mouse is?
Yes, sir.
Okay. If you just follow that evidence section across, it has a date. What date was that?
5/19/2016.
And there's initials out there to the side as well?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so are those yours?
Yes, sir.
Underneath that, what's the next header read?
Evidence rules and procedures,
And the date?
5/19/2016.
And those are your initials as well?
Yes, sir.
All right, and then right under that, the next header,
Evidence collections, processing, and preservation,
and the date, the handwritten date?
5/19/2016.
And are those the same initials?
Yes, sir.
Is this where you documented that you went over these areas with the defendant?
Yes, sir.
If he had not understood it or been unable to follow these, would you have signed this, initialed this?
No, sir.
Okay. Mrs. Bittner, could I get you to go to page 93 of 1B as in boy? All right, there should be a header which reads policy and procedure. And then underneath that header, collection and processing and preservation of evidence.
Yes, sir.
You see where her mouse is moving?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And how about that date?
It's 5/19/2016.
And are those your initials as well?
Yes, sir.
Does this also document where you reviewed this information with the defendant, he demonstrated that he knew and understood it?
Yes, sir.
Mrs. Bittner, if I could get you to go to page 91 of 1B as in boy. Okay, there should be a header that reads evidence, collection, and procedure, third from the top. If you could scroll back up. All right, right there. Are you able to see, this page is a little bit darker, but are you able to see it?
Yes, sir, I can see it. Yes, sir.
And it specifically addresses a handout and it's dated, correct?
Yes, sir.
And initialed by you as well?
Yes, sir.
Is this where the defendant demonstrated that he knew how to collect and preserve and submit evidence and follow these procedures?
This is the documentation where he was giving the information through the FTO manual and through the handout.
All right, moving on from evidence. Did this training also include, Mr. Chris, the importance of being thorough and investigating probable cause when arresting someone?
Yes, sir.
Mrs. Bittner, could I get you to go to page 21 of 1B as in boy? All right, in the middle of this page, there's a paragraph that begins the authority to deprive. Are you able to see that, Mr. Chris?
Yes, sir.
Could you read that into the record, please?
The authority to deprive someone of their freedom and permanently alter their future when you arrest them is one that should not is one that should be taken very seriously. Some officers do not comprehend the weight of this responsibility and the consequence of their actions.
Right, and the next paragraph?
Never arrest someone because you are unable to determine who is at fault. Do not have the mindset that you will arrest them and let the court system figure it out. This is a lazy and irresponsible approach to the job.
Did the defendant demonstrate that he understood this information?
Yes, sir, he was given this information.
Mr. Crisp, did the defendant ultimately successfully complete this training?
Yes, sir.
All right, Mrs. Bittner, if I could get you to go to page 3 of 1B as in boy. All right, and do you recognize, go ahead and scroll down to the very bottom, Ms. Bittner, so we can see who wrote it, authored this. All right, do you recognize this, Mr. Crisp?
Yes, sir.
All right, and just generally, what is this? What are we looking at on page 3 of 1B?
This is a letter I wrote to Sergeant Shane Tipton, who was over the FTO program at that time. And it's a letter I wrote about Mr. Wester saying that he had completed the FTO program and was ready for solo patrol.
And specifically, it's not all that long, so I am going to ask you to read the body of that letter into the record.
Okay. Dear Sergeant Tipton, during the past few weeks, I've had the pleasure of being a field training officer for Deputy Sheriff Zach Wester. During these weeks, Wester has completed all the tests and training outlined in the Jackson County Sheriff's Office Field Training Manual. Wester, from the start, has required very little instruction. He is very knowledgeable in the responsibilities and duties of a law enforcement officer and Florida statutes. Wester conducts himself politely and professionally with everyone he comes in contact with. Wester's calls and reports show his dedication to his job and the citizens of this county. Wester has worked diligently to learn the policies and procedure of the Jackson County Sheriff's Office and has done so very quickly. At this time, I would like to recommend Deputy Sheriff Zach Wester for regular duty in the Patrol Division at the Jackson County Sheriff's Office. Sincerely, Corporal Will Crisp, Jackson 33.
That's all I have right now, Judge.
Cross.
Good morning.
Yes, sir.
My name is Ryan Davis. I just have a couple of questions for you. So you were Mr. Wester's field training officer?
Yes, sir.
And that took, you spent approximately 4 weeks with him?
Yes, sir.
And then obviously this was the end of it where you recommended him for the road?
Yes, sir.
Solo? Now, the prosecutor was asking you about some of the training and things you went through. I wanted to also ask you about on the, I guess it would be 1D, the Jackson County Sheriff's Office Policy on Evidence. You can pull that up for me. And scroll down to page 9. You can go down to the bottom of the page. Keep going.
You're on page 5, ma'am.
Yeah, on page 5. Go all the way down to the bottom of the page right there. Vehicles or other motorized vehicles. You would have gone over this with Mr. Wester as well, correct?
Yes, sir.
And if we could scroll down to section B, top of page 10 there. And then security. Could you read that paragraph for
Yes,
us?
sir. It's B, security vehicles requiring processing to such an extent that an on-scene examination is not practical. The vehicle will be towed and placed in the evidence section, secured garage area, where the exposure to the elements is minimal.
I can stop you right there for just a second. Where is the secured area of the evidence section?
At this time, it was a a garage next to the evidence section at the sheriff's office that could be locked up. It had a cage around it and a roll-up door, but it could be secured from the rest of the sheriff's office.
Okay. You could continue reading that?
Let me see where I was. Okay. Evidence personnel will be notified when a vehicle needs to be placed in the secured area of the evidence so that they may open the doors. What that's saying is that roll-up door is going to be locked, so you needed to call somebody that had access to it to open the door.
Yeah.
The vehicle will have evidence tape placed on the doors and trunk. A vehicle impound envelope will be filled out and the keys placed in the envelope. The envelope will be given to evidence personnel or placed in the evidence locker. If needed, the FDLA crime lab will be notified to set up a time for them to process the vehicles or other motorized vehicles.
Okay. And so this policy came out in November of 2011?
I believe that's correct.
And this is a policy that was in effect when Mr. Wester became a deputy sheriff?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And this policy would have been known throughout the Jackson County Sheriff's Office, correct?
Yes, sir.
And that your understanding is how, if you were going to secure a vehicle at the Jackson County Sheriff's Office, that's the way it's supposed to be done, correct?
If I'm securing a vehicle that needs processing,
Right.
that's the way it's going to be done. If I'm just towing a vehicle that was blocking traffic on the side of the road, it goes into a different section. This is for a vehicle that may contain evidence that needs processing either by our investigators or FDLE crime lab.
Right. And the purpose of that is to make sure that nobody can access the vehicle, correct?
Yes, sir.
So if a vehicle is sitting for 4 or 5 weeks, you want to make sure that it is secured and nobody is entering that vehicle, correct?
Well, I believe there's a policy on this, and the evidence collection and processing of that vehicle needs to take place within 3 days is what the...
Okay, so not only does it need to be taped up and secure, but it's also the policy of the Jackson County Sheriff's Office that vehicle needs to be searched within 3 days?
I believe that's correct. I would have to look that up.
Okay. If I can have just a moment, Your Honor? Mm-hmm. I don't have any further questions for this witness.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Crisp.
Thank you.
Mr. Williams, you have any follow-up?
I have some brief follow-up.
You can stay there, Mr. Crisp. Thank you, sir.
Chris, just following up where Mr. Davis left off with you.
Yes, sir.
On page 9 and 10, what we've just reviewed here of 1D is in dog. That's referring to criminal investigations or criminal processing by the Jackson County Sheriff's Office, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you, Mr. Chris.
Thank you.
Mr. Williams, are you going to ask that Mr. Crisp be subject to any sort of recall?
Yes, sir.
All right, Mr. Crisp, your testimony for purposes of this morning is done. We may need you at a later date, so I'm going to ask that you not talk with anybody outside of this courtroom about the questions you were asked or the answers that you gave in this courtroom, okay? You are subject to recall under the umbrella of the court at this time, all right?
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you, sir. You're excused. All right, Mr. Williams, who would you like to call next?
Kevin Arnold.
Kevin Arnold. Mr. Arnold, if you'll raise your right hand, sir.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the evidence you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
You may be seated. Thank you, Mr. Arnold. A couple of things. If you'll speak to the back of the room, our jury is sitting out here today. We need everybody to be able to hear your testimony. The second thing is if you hear an objection, pause your testimony. I'll make a ruling on that objection and tell you how to proceed, okay?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Shade Attorney?
Good morning, sir. Would you state your name for the record?
Good morning. Kevin Arnold.
And how are you employed?
I'm a captain with the Jackson County Sheriff's Office.
How long have you been with that agency?
Well, over 25 years.
All right. Suffice it to say you were working there from 2016 to 2018?
Yes, sir.
Okay. In very general terms, would you just tell the jury what the patrol division is?
Okay. The patrol division is ladies and gentlemen that are dressed in myself in a uniform capacity. And we have the initial contact with most victims or citizens that contact us for service. We get calls for service that range from welfare checks to crimes that have been committed. So we go out and make contact with them and investigate those crimes. And do a lot of other functions. We serve warrants, civil process, may go to put on safety seminars and discuss some safety factors and different for the community. So we do a lot of a range of things in uniform patrol.
Yes, sir. Now, you mentioned that patrol deputies are in uniform, correct?
That is correct.
Are they also in marked cars?
In marked vehicles, yes, sir.
All right, that reads sheriff's deputy and kind of what we all consider police cars, correct?
That's correct. Now, we may have some supervisors that may be in some unmarked units, but they have a police package type unit.
Okay. I want to ask you, do you remember the defendant, Zachary Wester, coming to work at the Jackson County Sheriff's Office?
I do.
Was he assigned to the patrol division?
Yes, sir.
Now, I'd like to ask you what kind of information is available to a patrol deputy in his or her assigned patrol car? What access to information do they have generally?
As far as like a computer automated dispatch type system, it's a laptop system that's in patrol vehicles. And what the system has is our dispatch receives calls, telephone calls from the citizens or from different people, and it's put into the computer system and it's sent out, and the officers have access to see what the top calls that have come in that they're dispatched to. They also have access with certifications to NCIC, FCIC, which is a national database that can run criminal history, run tags, and that nature.
Okay. So if a patrol deputy has somebody's information, whether that's a license or whatever, they got it during a lawful stop, maybe they're giving somebody a ticket and they have their ID, would they, if they had that patrol car, would they have access potentially to that person's criminal history?
They could, yes.
Okay. You mentioned, I think you called it computer automated dispatch, is that correct?
Yes, CAD, that's correct.
All right, and that's what I was going to follow up with. Is that generally referred to as CAD?
Yes.
Or a CAD report?
It's considered CAD. A CAD report would probably be something you might pull out of the,
Okay.
IT might be able to pull out of the system itself.
Is dispatch a separate section from patrol?
It is their station at the sheriff's office.
All right. And generally, what is it that dispatch is doing as far as their interactions with patrol?
Dispatch, again, they can take calls for service. When citizens call, they want to report a burglary or theft or something in that nature, they'll contact dispatch. Dispatch will enter the top call that they're receiving with the information, with the victim's name, address, telephone number, and the details of the call will be put in. They work fire rescue, emergency type calls. They receive those through 911. Those are also put into a CAD system, and directed services for that top call will go out to fire rescue, could go to uniform patrol, would be first responders. So they take a lot of information that they gather and put into the system, and it can be directed back to the deputies on the road.
Okay. And if a patrol deputy is out on patrol during their shift and they have probable cause and make an arrest of somebody, they have the authority to do that, correct?
That's correct.
If they have probable cause, correct?
Probable cause.
All right. When that is done, does that same patrol deputy generally author the report documenting the incident?
That's correct.
And are those reports relied on by the sheriff's office to document that incident properly?
Right. The case they may be working, they'll do an incident report that's entered into the CAD system.
All right, just a moment, Mr. Arnold, Captain Arnold. That's all I have, Judge.
Mr. Davis?
No questions for this witness.
Mr. Williams, are you going to want Mr. Arnold to be subject to recall?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Arnold, if you'll do the court a favor, just in case you're needed to give further testimony in the case, if you'll not talk with anybody about the questions you were asked or your answers in this proceeding today, the state's requested that you could potentially be subject to recall. Okay, sir?
Yes, sir.
All right, you are released for the morning. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Who would the state like to call next?
Caleb Corbin.
Caleb Corbin. Mr. Corbin, will you raise your right hand for me, sir?
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the evidence you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you, Mr. Corbin. You can sit down, sir. Mr. Corbin, that's the jury in the case. That's who you need to make sure you're speaking loud enough that all of those folks can hear you today. If you hear an objection, pause your testimony, and I will instruct you how to proceed. Okay, sir?
Yes, sir.
All right. Go ahead, counsel.
Good morning. Would you state your name for the record?
Caleb Corbin?
All right. And Mr. Corbin, were you previously employed by the Jackson County Sheriff's Office?
I was.
All right. Specifically, were you working there from 2016 to 2018?
I was.
What was your position? What part of the sheriff's office did you work with?
I was the network administrator for the sheriff's office.
You are a little bit soft-spoken. Would you mind repeating that and just speaking? Judge, could maybe the jury indicate if they can hear him? I'm not trying to.
Everybody hear Mr. Corbin? If you can't, just raise your right hand and we'll make sure he speaks louder. But Mr. Corbin, Mr. Gary, raise your right hand, Mr. Gary. That's who you're speaking to. So when you talk, that's who I want you to talk to. You understand, Mr. Corbin?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
All right. Could you just repeat what section of the sheriff's office you worked in and what you did for him?
Sure. I was the network administrator for the sheriff's office.
All right. What does that mean?
So basically, I was full-time IT guy. Any duties and roles, computer-related, body camera-related, stuff like that was my responsibility.
That's what I was going to ask. Body camera related. Did your duties involve some interaction with the body camera system at the sheriff's office at that time?
Yes, it did.
All right. As such, were you familiar with how they operated?
I was.
All right. I'd like to ask you specifically about the Axon body cameras. Do you recall those being used at that time?
They were.
All right. And same thing. Were you familiar with how they were operated?
I was.
Just generally, could you tell the jury, how they were designed to be positioned on the uniform, what they were designed to depict, that kind of thing?
So the process that we kind of determined with the body cameras is the deputy was allowed to put the body camera anywhere they wanted to put it on their chest area. We had some guys that wore it, right or left side of their chest. A lot of guys wore it in the center of their chest. Body camera was positioned there. Policy was developed and stated that anytime they got out on a call that they would turn on a camera. Actually, I'm sorry, it was at officer's discretion. There were certain calls that were depicted in the policy that they needed to be turned on for.
But body camera had a switch on the top of it. You turned it on to start your shift, and then to actually start the recording with the body camera, you would double tap center of the chest and it would start the recording.
Let me ask you a follow-up there. You mentioned there were some that were distinguished, that there was officer discretion. What about a patrol stop where somebody is taken out of a car, a search is conducted, and somebody is potentially arrested?
Yes, it was definitely encouraged for them to wear that and have it on then, for sure,
Okay. Partially or from beginning to end? Or?
from beginning to end.
Okay. And you mentioned that there was a policy for that, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. Let me ask you this. Would you describe to the jury the technical operation of the Axon body camera? So for instance, how could it even, you mentioned where it was positioned, but how could it be turned on?
So in order to turn the camera on, as I kind of touched on before, the camera had a switch on the very top of it. You just slid the switch. That would turn the camera on. That wasn't it recording. They kind of state it as a buffer state. It's recording, but it's not saving the video until the officer or the deputy double clicks the center. There's a center round button in the center of the camera. They would double click that. That would jump the video back in time, about a minute in time, and that would grab both audio and video of the recording. Now, there was a lot of, if a deputy didn't turn the camera on with the slide switch, a lot of times they would get out, turn the camera on with the slide switch, and then press the record button in the center. So with that, it got, as soon as that, body camera was turned on.
And just to be clear, how would a deputy, was there a function of the camera to notify a deputy if it was actually on?
Sure. The body camera had three abilities to be able to let someone know, the deputy or someone around the deputy. It had an audible beep, it had a vibrate, and it had an LED on the top of it. The LED would blink green when it was on and red when it was recording. The deputy did have the ability to turn that off, and that would go into, can't remember the state of it.
That'd be called a stealth mode?
Yes, sir, stealth mode. They could turn certain features of the camera off, so they could turn off the LEDs, they could turn off the vibrate, they could turn off the audible beep. And that was it was at officer's discretion, more for officer safety. Don't want a big bright light on the center of their chest, or a beep letting someone know where they're at. But most of the time, the guys kept all that on.
Now, at the end of let's say a patrol deputy shift, what were they supposed to do with that body camera?
So at the end of their shift, if it was the end of a 2-day or 3-day shift, the guys worked a 2-day or a 3-day shift. At the end of their shift, they were to dock the camera at the sheriff's department and download all of the video that was on that camera.
Okay, that's what I was going to ask. How would a video that was captured end up getting preserved to where it could be used at a later date? So you said it would be docketed, correct?
It would be docked at there at the sheriff's office. We had 2 docks that were mandated. That was the only place they were to download their video. And then that was stored on evidencelibrary.com's Axon's cloud server that was stored off premise.
Okay. And were the body cameras assigned to specific deputies? So for instance, if I come in after it's been docked, am I going to get the same one back, or is it just up for grabs?
No, they were assigned to
Okay.
specific deputies, and we had actually labeled the back of the body cameras to say whose camera it was.
Okay. That's all I have.
Mr. Davis, pull that mic closer to him if you don't mind, counsel.
Good morning, Mr. Corbin.
Good morning.
Yeah, my name's Ryan Davis. I introduced myself to you earlier.
Yes, sir.
I just have a couple questions for you. So you were the IT person for the Jackson County Sheriff's Office, correct?
That is correct.
You were pretty much the office.
Yes, sir.
I understand that you work at the Bay County Sheriff's Office now?
Yes, sir, I do.
Same position?
I'm a network technician there. We quite a few more guys there, so a little bit less responsibility, but yes, sir.
Okay. And I'm assuming maybe a little better pay to move?
Yes, sir.
Now, the prosecutor's asking you about the Axon cameras. When did the Jackson County Sheriff's Office get those cameras?
I want to say it was probably around 2016, 2017. I'm not exactly for sure. There's documentation of exactly when we started using those.
Would the end of September 2017 sound familiar?
That sounds about right. I do know it was right before the end of a fiscal year. We went through a demo process of them. We used, had a couple that were used, and then we approved them, and then that's what we purchased.
And the cameras that you had before were a different brand, correct?
Yes, sir.
And those cameras, do you remember what company made those?
They were ProVision body cameras.
ProVision body cameras? Okay. And let's skip ahead again. So the Axon cameras, when the Sheriff's Office bought the Axon cameras, did you help develop the policy for those cameras?
With some guidance from both Axon and some other agencies around the state. Axon had provided several agencies around the state that were accredited agencies that were using the Axon cameras. They provided their policy. We kind of molded it to our sheriff's office, but yes.
Okay. And then, so the ProVision cameras that were being used before, was there somebody at the sheriff's office that was in charge of checking and make sure that the deputies were using them properly?
There was,
Do you remember who that was?
that would have been Mike Hodges.
Okay. And with those ProVision cameras, the policy at the time, how long were those videos kept for, stored at the sheriff's office?
They were stored for 90 days.
Okay. And if nobody went in and documented that, hey, these videos need to be kept, they'd be erased after 90 days, correct?
Not necessarily.
But they could be.
They could be, yes.
And Mike Hodges was the person that was in charge of making sure things were downloaded properly, correct?
That is correct.
And he would also be the one then that would delete videos that he thought were irrelevant.
Correct.
And then moving into the Axon cameras, my understanding was those are a little more secure in their system, correct?
Yes, sir.
And those cameras, when they're downloaded, the information is actually uploaded to a cloud,
That is correct.
and that's called evidence.com.
That is correct.
And there are certain administrators that have access to that to be able to delete videos at that point, correct?
That is correct, yes, sir.
And Mr. Wester would not have been able to delete his own videos that were uploaded, correct?
No, sir.
I believe you would have had that ability, correct?
Yes, sir.
And Mike Hodges?
Yes, sir.
Anybody else?
I believe there was a patrol secretary, and the only reason she had that access was for redaction capabilities.
Okay. And do you know how long the videos would be stored on evidence.com?
I believe we had it set for 120 days. State statute said 90 days, so we wanted to go ahead and extend it past that.
Okay, so you guys did another 30 days past
Yes,
what
sir.
the state statute required?
Yes, sir.
Okay. But there was somebody designated who was supposed to be reviewing the videos before they were deleted to make sure they had an evidentiary value.
Yes, sir, that is correct.
Nothing further.
Any follow-up, Mr. Williams?
Just a moment, Judge. Could a patrol deputy also determine whether or not their body camera video had been actually loaded after it had been docked?
Could they log in to evidence.com and see their video?
Right. Was there a way for a patrol deputy to view to see, well, I made an arrest the other day, and I want to see if it got logged properly?
So initially, before the video was downloaded on the dock, the deputy could use their phone via Bluetooth to connect to the camera. It was just a monitor, a viewing device. It was not actually editing the video in any sort of way. They could actually watch the video, and then after the body camera was docked, then they would be able to log into evidence.com and actually see that video.
Mr. Davis asked you about your capabilities with your position. Did you ever delete any videos
No, sir.
related to this case?
No, sir.
Did you ever assist Lieutenant Hodges in deleting any videos from this case that pertain to this criminal case?
No, sir.
Okay, that's all.
Mr. Davis, any follow-up?
I can have just a moment. Nothing further.
Okay. Do you want to keep Mr. Corbin as a potential witness from the state's perspective?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Corbin, I'm going to ask you not talk with anybody outside of this courtroom about your testimony, the questions you were asked, et cetera. Today, you're still under the umbrella of the court through the remainder of evidence and testimony in this case. As the state has indicated, they may want to recall you, okay? Do you understand that, sir?
Yes, sir.
You are released for purposes this morning, okay? Thank you, sir. Mr. State Attorney, my thoughts right now, or maybe we can get one more in before lunch.
Yes, sir.
Who do you anticipate calling next?
Diana Chase.
All right. Diana Chase?
Judge, may Mr. Davis and I approach?
Yes, sir. Mr. Chase, will you raise your right hand?
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the evidence you are about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
All right, Ms. Chase, you may be seated. A couple things. Our jury is out where our audience normally is, so that's who you're speaking with. You need to speak loud enough so that everybody in the room can hear you. With these masks on, we're muffled at times, so it's important you speak up so everybody can hear you. Same thing is if you hear an objection, if you pause your testimony, I'll make a ruling on the objection and tell you how to proceed, okay?
Okay.
All right. Go ahead, Mr. State Attorney.
All right, good morning. Would you state your name for the record?
Diana Chase.
And how are you employed?
I'm a special agent with Florida Department of Law Enforcement.
Was your agency, FDLE, referred this case, this criminal case we're here for today, for an independent criminal investigation?
Yes.
All right? And were you assigned as the case agent for this case?
Yes.
Now, as such, did you collect case files for the listed victims from the Jackson County Sheriff's Office?
Yes, I did.
All right? And specifically, I'm going to ask you one by one about each one. Did you collect a case file related to Maria Turner from an arrest July 14th of 2017?
Yes.
Okay? And that case file, actually, let's keep going. Did it also include Mr. Reginald Williams
Yes.
from an arrest of August 30th of 2017?
Yes.
Mr. Benjamin Bowling from October 2nd of 2017?
Yes.
Mr. Derek Benefield from October 16th, 2017?
Yes.
Mr. Richard Driggers from February 9th, 2018?
Yes.
Mrs. Teresa Odom, February 15th of 2018?
Yes.
Mr. Joshua Clenny from March 14th of 2018?
Yes.
Mr. Joshua Emanuel from April 8th, 2018?
Yes.
Mr. Stephen Van, April 17th of 2018?
Yes.
Mr. Trevor Day from May 4th of 2018?
Yes.
Mr. James Fears from June 3rd, 2018?
Yes.
And Mrs. Kimberly Hazelwood from June 7th of 2018?
Yes.
And have you reviewed state's exhibits, composite exhibits 2 through 13 before today,
Yes.
okay? And just for the record, there are 2 boxes here in the courtroom. Are they contained in these 2 boxes?
Yes.
Okay. Do those include the case files that you've previously testified to?
Yes.
And do those case files include things like the arrest reports from those incidents,
Yes.
the offense reports,
Yes.
any seized items that the defendant allegedly seized from those listed victims,
Yes.
the FDLE chemistry lab reports indicating what kind of drugs they may have tested for or not,
Yes.
any potential chain of custody records for those items showing where they went and to whom.
Yes.
Do they also contain booking information or what may be called a jail detention report showing somebody was booked into jail for how long?
Yes.
Do they also include discs of body cameras which relate to those arrests made by the defendant for those victims?
Yes.
Now, not every one of these contains a body camera video, correct?
Correct.
Specifically, which ones do not?
The ones that do not contain a body camera are from Maria Turner, Reginald Williams, Benjamin Bowling, and Derek Benefield.
Okay. Judge, at this time, I'd move states composite exhibits 2 through 13 into evidence.
Any objection?
No objection.
2 through 13 will be admitted.
Judge, at this time, I would move to publish only 2A, an arrest affidavit and complaint related to Joshua Manuel. That's 2A.
Be published.
Just a moment, Ms. Chase, getting the technology connected, and there it is. Are you able to see that on the screen in front of you?
Yes. Yes.
All right, it's all right.
When was FDLE assigned to take over the investigation of Mr. Wester?
It was in August of 2018.
Okay. Was it August 1st?
I believe so. That was when a complaint was received.
Okay. And your job, as part of your investigation, as you told the state, or in answering his questions, you went and gathered up all these different case files, correct?
Correct.
And that includes the reports like the one we're seeing there, the videos, which we'll see some later, all those types of things, correct?
Correct.
And the videos, where did you get the videos from?
The videos they were a combination. I got either from the Jackson County Sheriff's Office themselves or from the State Attorney's Office.
Okay. Which ones did you get from the Jackson County Sheriff's Office and which ones did you get from the State Attorney's Office as it relates to the 12 case files that you have here?
Okay, let me try and remember.
Do you have something that would help refresh your memory? Would you need to take a look at the box?
That might help.
We could let the witness step down, Judge, so she can
Let's
take a
do
look.
this. Let's just bring the box over here to her right, if you don't mind. Her left, I'm sorry. Put them on the floor, and she can take a second and peruse those in the court's presence.
Not that heavy.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. Take your time, Ms. Chase.
Okay, I'm going to try and go through.
Okay.
In
And
order.
take your time, because we just want to make sure we get it correct.
Okay, so to the best of my memory, so like I said earlier, bowling did not have a video associated with it.
Correct.
Teresa Odom, I received from the State Attorney's Office.
Okay.
Maria Turner did not have a video associated, and neither did Derek Benefield. James Christopher Fears was received from the State Attorney's Office. Kimberly Hazelwood, I believe initially came from the Sheriff's Office, but I might have also received it when I asked for it from the State Attorney's Office as well. But initially, it came from the Sheriff's Office.
Okay.
Joshua Emanuel, I'm not sure, I believe that came from the State Attorney's Office as well. Reginald Williams, like I explained earlier, did not have a video associated with it. Steve Van, I believe, was one of the cases where I received it from both the Sheriff's Office and the State Attorney's Office, as was Trevor Day. Richard Driggers came from the State Attorney's Office, and so did Joshua Clooney's.
And the cases that don't have the videos, Turner, Bowling, Benefield, and Williams, did those all take place in 2017? Were those arrests by Mr. Wester in 2017?
Yes.
Okay. As also part of your investigation, you did not search Mr. Wester's patrol vehicle, did you?
I did not.
Okay. Did you ever try to get a search warrant for his vehicle?
I did not apply for a search warrant.
Okay. Did anybody from FDLE apply for a search warrant for his vehicle?
No.
Okay. Were you ever asked by the Sheriff's Department to come search his vehicle?
No.
Stop. Sidebar.
Ask the question again, counsel.
Yes, sir. Did anybody from the Jackson County Sheriff's Office ever ask you to search Mr. Wester's vehicle?
No.
Okay. Nothing further at this time.
All right. Mr. Williams, anything else?
No, Judge.
All right, and I think Ms. Chase may be back to see us for some later testimony.
Yes, sir.
Ms. Chase, you are still subject to the oversight of this court. You're not released from your overall duty to testify, so do not talk with any other witnesses or third parties about what testimony you've given today or about what questions you were asked in court, okay, ma'am?
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you, ma'am. You're released for the morning, though. Thank you. All right, Mr. State Attorney, you agree this is a good point for a lunch recess?
Yes, sir.
All right, Jerry, this is going to be the point we break for lunch for the morning. We've got some things we need to get taken care of for this afternoon for you to get ready to go. Again, I'm going to kind of go over everything just to make sure we're all on the same page. You are not to speak with each other about this case at all. Let me repeat that. You are not to speak with each other about this case at all. At this time, we're not even close to the time where you can speak with each other about this case. So just assume you can't do it until I tell you otherwise. You are not to look up anything. You are not to research anything having to do with this case.
You are not to talk with anybody, either in person, by phone, by any electronic device, about what you've heard or seen today, or your thoughts or anything about this case. If somebody approaches you about this case, I instruct you to flee, was the word we used last Wednesday. Get away from them and report it to the bailiff immediately. You are going to be allowed to go off-site for lunch today or off-campus for lunch, so you've got some flexibility there. Just make sure you preserve the integrity of what we're doing here today, and I know I've instructed you on numerous occasions now on how you're going to do that. It is 11:45 right now. I'm going to ask that you be back seated in that jury room at 12:55. Again, that would be an hour and 10 minutes for your lunch recess today. That's a little extended. We may not go that long every day, but I think where we're at is appropriate for that amount of lunch recess. Again, Mr. Gary is going to assist in escorting you out. You're going to leave your notepads in your chairs. We'll make sure those are preserved in a safe place over lunch. You are also going to leave your name tags on, and we will see you back in that jury room at 12:55. Is there any reason they shouldn't be excused, State? Defense? I'll be back in that jury room at 12:55.